Hey everyone. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about what I think is a really kind of interesting concept. It's kind of my favorite new pet idea, and this is the concept of hyperobjects and how I think we can kind of understand ourselves as hyperobjects, and also we can understand psychedelics as its own hyperobject. And the way these two hyperobjects interact is really important to understand. I think there's kind of a deeper implication here that I really want to convey to you about your own kind of personal growth and healing path with psychedelics that I think is really something a lot of people don't grasp, they don't get, and I think makes a big difference in how you approach it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. And really quick, before we go ahead and get into it, I just want to kind of show off my shirt here. As silly as that seems, I'm a proud owner of a MAPS Test Pilot shirt, which means that I did the MAPS Test Pilot program for the newly released courses that they've been offering online. So I did them all. I think I was the third cohort of people kind of testing and going through the lectures and trying all the stuff out and learning about it. And I have my own thoughts and opinions about it. And so if that's something you're interested in hearing about, if you want to learn more about these courses, get my take as someone who does psychedelic integration work and psychedelic healing with people, and if you just kind of want to get a different perspective on if this would be useful for you or not, let me know in the comment section down below. I'd be happy to make that video, but if nobody's watching and nobody cares, then I won't bother. So, okay, let's go ahead and get into the main topic for today's video. So like I said in the intro, it's my new favorite kind of concept here is this idea of hyperobjects. And in order to explain to you how you're a hyperobject or how psychedelics are hyperobject and what the implications of that are, first I'm going to have to define them for you. So I just want to say off the bat that I'm kind of using this term perhaps a little bit loosely. I may not totally understand it because I haven't read the book about hyperobjects yet, but it's on my to-do list. But just as a loose general kind of metaphor or framework for understanding, I think you'll get it here. Basically, hyperobjects are a term coined by Timothy Morton. And the idea, as far as I understand it, is that a hyperobject is anything that is something we experience the effects of in our life, but is so big that we don't have an experience of the entirety of the thing. So some examples off the bat, could be all the pollution in the ocean combined. That's something that none of us has ever seen or can really conceptualize of in its totality, but it's there and it impacts our experience of life on Earth. Another example might be the economy of your country, right? You experience directly and locally and personally how the economy is impacting you, but you can't necessarily see, touch, or interact with the entirety of your country's economy, right? So that's a hyper object. In other words, these are objects that are much larger than our ability to fully kind of perceive and understand and experience, but we experience part of them, right? Another good example of this might be the parable of the blind man with the elephant. I've heard it as 3 or 6, doesn't really matter. But with the blind man and the elephant, basically the parable is that these blind men were brought to experience an elephant, and different men, of course, were touching different parts of the elephant, whether it was a leg and it felt like a tree trunk, or one, it felt like maybe a wall, or like a piece of leather. To another, it felt like a snake because of the trunk, this kind of a thing. And so each blind man reports back a different experience of what the elephant is. But the elephant is an elephant. It's whole, it's complete, and all the different takes and experiences of what the elephant is are true and correct. So that's essentially what I'm talking about when I'm talking about hyperobjects here. What I mean is any sort of experience that is much larger than our ability to perceive or experience it in its totality. So that being said, let's go ahead and apply that to what I was just saying earlier about how you and I and psychedelics are all hyperobjects. All right, let's talk about it. Okay, so now that we've defined what it means to encounter a hyperobject, what a hyperobject is, let me kind of contextualize that back a bit to what I mean in terms of our experience of psychedelics and our experience of ourselves. So here's the thing. as we are working on our own mind, on our own psychology, on our own lived experience, on our own memories, whether it's to, heal trauma, whether it's to repattern some part of our behavior that we don't like about ourselves or we want to upgrade, whether that is to understand maybe what happened in the past, whether that's to understand the deeper motivations for why we have a pattern or an experience that we want to change in our lives in the first place. Underneath all of that is the deeper truth that in terms of what you can perceive and know and experience about yourself, your conscious mind can only handle a very small window of information at a time. But the sum totality of all of your mind, of all that you are, of everything you've ever thought about or felt or seen or lived or experienced, and all the different layers of each experience you've ever had, including the unconscious experiences, the kind of genetic memory components, there's so much more there to who you are. You are so much more than you could ever possibly pay attention to in a given moment, right? And so as we're self-healing and we're working on ourselves or transforming ourselves, we have this funny tension between what we can notice, what we can pay attention to, what we can really realistically interact with and perceive and feel and sense, whether even just about the problem, just the issue area of your life. Let's say it's depression or anxiety or, thought loops or something like that. Even just inside of that, there's probably going to be so much more to that experience in your lived experience than you're able to pay attention to in a given moment, right? So we have this interesting tension that we're always working with, that we are so much bigger than what we can work with at a time, right? This is also true with psychedelics in general. I think one of the biggest problems in the world of psychedelics and psychedelic healing and psychedelic therapy and using psychedelics for personal change and growth, one of the biggest problems in this entire field is that when I say psychedelics to you, or when you say it to me, or you hear someone else use this term, what that means to me or to you or to them is totally different inside of each of our nervous systems. The memories, the level of consciousness that we go to, the visions we've had, the body sensations we've had, the way that fits into other things we've learned, whether, that's listening to Alan Watts or Stoicism or Hinduism or, Ram Dass or what have you, right? Like, we are all getting different inputs about this kind of shared experience called psychedelics, right? And because of those different inputs, when I say and talk about the psychedelic experience or psychedelic healing or how to work with psychedelics, that's really going to mean something very different for each one of us. So psychedelics themselves are a massive hyperobject. The sum total of different types of experiences, even just I in my own life have had with psychedelics, they're too broad for me to understand in one conceptualization. It takes multiple memories and lots of different thinking and lots of different moments, and there's a lot there, right? And that's true for each one of us. So one of the difficulties on this path is understanding that and not mistaking, first of all, my lived experience for yours or vice versa, right? That not being confused that we actually understand what each other means when we use the term psychedelic. And also, when we're talking about working with ourselves, we have so many different facets and aspects and parts to our personality and our lived experience and the different aspects and levels and layers of our psyche that I think it's important to understand when you're looking at an issue in your life that you want to heal and you want to change, whether that's, again, trauma healing or depression or anxiety or a behavior pattern in yourself that you don't like, whatever it might be. I think it's really important to understand that when you're looking at one piece of it, there is a much bigger picture of the whole system of the problem, let alone the even bigger system of the entirety of who you are, right? And this is important because it grounds us in humility, first of all. It also grounds us in the understanding that we may encounter the problem from different perspectives and facets in order to get more effective change, or in order to really understand it more completely. So just want to kind of put that message out there, because I think it's easy when you're learning about psychedelic therapy or psychedelics, or how to self-heal, or any of this stuff, or even just psychology in general and personal development in general. It's easy to assume that everybody's talking about the same thing, or that your experience of yourself is consistently the same. And that's simply not true. And that's not because I'm not trying to make like a big relativistic argument here that like you can never, touch back on the same place in yourself or something like that. It's just that you are much bigger and deeper and much more complex than maybe you realize. The same is true of psychedelics. And the way those two interact is always going to be nuanced and different and complex, just by the nature of the amount of information contained in both. So that's kind of my point for today. I hope that serves you well. I hope that's a good reminder. Thanks for watching. And, if you like this kind of content and you're not a subscriber, please consider liking the video just to let the algorithm know, and consider subscribing to the channel. I'm going to have a lot more of this content on the way here shortly. So anyways, take care. I'll see you guys soon.